to Life After College Week. My name is Carla Orlando. I'm here with a colleague, Davina Simmons, and we are kicking off Life After College Week with some of our favorite people on campus. We're going to bring some voice to Vocation today, hopefully with a little wit and wisdom and storytelling. So we want to hear a lot from them, and we want to hear a lot from you and your questions. So Davina and I have some questions to begin, but we'd like you to be thinking about your questions to one of these panelists. We've got some favorite people. Professors Bradley Murg and Debbie Pope in the middle, Brian Bantum right next to her, and Rod Stiling next to him. And over sneaking into the crowd is our very own President Dan Martin, who we know will bring a lot of fun for the hour. So we'll start today by having each of you introduce yourselves by sharing just a few tidbits of your past. Maybe what you dreamt about becoming when you were a child, what you majored in when you were an undergraduate, how you ended up at graduate school, and finally, what was your job or jobs before arriving at this fine place of Seattle Pacific University? So I think we might just go down the row. That won't be for every question. We'll kind of popcorn it, but we want to hear each voice before we begin. So Rod, I'm going to have you start.
All of those or just the one?
Whatever ones that you're inspired.
Okay. Well, good afternoon, Falcons, and thank you for skipping lunch. Wait, she's not skipping lunch. She's eating lunch. I am Rod Stiling. I'm assigned to the history department here. Been here, I'm in my 16th year. I was born in a previous millennium, prior to this one. And I calculated, I just stumbled on this, but it's been less than a year that I figured out that I was born exactly, not to the day, but to the year. I was born 77 years after the speech that made that expression famous. So I now have a goal to live at least 87 years, so there'll be like three, By the way, if I lived to age 87, I figured out I will have been alive for 1/3 of the history of our country, which is spooky. But anyway, my father was a naval officer, and he was a naval aviator, and so that's pretty much what I wanted to do. And we were all about flying at our house, and it was lots of fun. In 6th grade, I became a wearer of glasses, and that made a big change in how things were going to turn out. So I don't remember. I don't want to do all the talking, but I went to college at UCLA, and what I did right after college, well, I should say, I wound up, not surprisingly, as a history major. But I did try out 6 different majors. I took the introductory courses in 6 different majors, largely, I would say, to shout out to our general education system, largely because we had a system called breadth requirements, which required us to try other things, and I was able to experiment with lots of things, and it was a really good situation. But anyway, the geopolitical scenarios being what they were in 1972, I found myself enlisting in the Navy myself, and it proved to be a fantastic first post-college experience. It was just amazing, and it's very stabilizing. You learn a lot of skills at a very high pace. You travel. It gave me a steady income, allowed me to reflect on things. It stabilized things long enough that I got married. It was a wonderful first gig out of college. And I don't know, I'm not paid to be a recruiter, but I do recommend it as something some people would be appropriate for some people to consider is military service right away. Wasn't in my mind when I went into the service, but when I came out of active duty, there I was with a benefits package that helped me go to my first graduate school. So I'll say that much. There's so much more, but I think we should get going here and hear from Professor Bantum.
Good afternoon, everybody. Let's see. Growing up, when I was a kid, for me, it wasn't so much fireman, astronaut, any of that. I actually just wanted to be a dad. If that sounds kind of strange. Well, I won't say the story behind it, but that's the only thing I could really imagine for myself. When I was 16, through a long story, I became Christian. And within a year after that, felt a really, really strong call to ministry and didn't know what that looked like. But just, and then I was like, well, I guess that means I'm going to be a pastor. And so I started paying a lot of attention to my senior pastor. I was like, I think I could do the sermon thing. I feel like that would be really fun. I think I could talk to people, like do kind of pastoral care, talk to people about their problems. Like that makes sense. But like, I don't know about potlucks. I don't know about greeting people before or after. I don't know about like having to go to parties all the time. It seems like people it seems like people want to talk to that person. I was kind of socially awkward, and so people didn't really like come out of their way to talk with me. So I was like, I don't know if I would be a good pastor, but I got to be obedient. So I started paying attention to other things. So I noticed that, you have a kind of pastors of education and children's ministry. I was pretty sure I didn't want to do youth. I didn't even like myself as a youth, much less anybody else as a youth. So I was pretty sure I did not want to be a youth pastor. But then I also, at the same time, transferred to a Christian high school and was really influenced by my history teacher. And I played soccer all through high school and loved soccer. So I started thinking, well, maybe what if I was like a history teacher in a Christian school, coach soccer, like that would be a good life. That would be a really, really good life. So I went to college. I was the first person in my family to go to college, so there was no good college preparation. So I actually ended up going to 4 different undergrads in 4 years. I wouldn't recommend it. So I went to my first school in North Carolina, more or less because I visited in February and it was 70 degrees there. And so I felt the call of God to Boiling Springs, North Carolina. And I got there and realized it was not the Christian university that I thought it was. So I transferred, went to community college for a semester. Then I went to Messiah College, a school in Pennsylvania, not unlike SPU. Was actually introduced to the person that would become my wife, but she went to school in Rochester. And so after 2 years of dating, we were like, this is kind of crazy. Why am I traveling 5 hours every weekend to visit? I should just transfer. So I transferred my senior year to Houghton College and had to do half my major, my history major, in 1 year. And so I ended up kind of by accident sitting in with this one professor who does theology, church history, because those were the only classes that didn't overlap. And so I was in with John Tyson, I think we were together 6 hours a day. It was crazy. We had so many classes. But through that process, I actually fell in love with church history and primary sources and just the kind of the ways in which Christians tried to think through who they were. Well, long story short, I had to write a thesis, I had to defend it, and I actually fell in love with the writing and research. I got to go to a real library at the University of Rochester. Our library, I love our library. It's not a big library. So at University of Rochester, I actually learned what research was in a much broader sense of the word. And my professor said, you'd do great at grad school. I think you should really think about it. And I was like, what's grad school? And they were like, that's how you could become a professor. I was like, what? I was like, I must have thought that they just storks dropped them into universities or something. I had no idea how this stuff worked. But I was like, no, I feel called. I'm going to do this. My wife was called to ministry as well, to be a worship, do worship ministry. So she got a job as worship minister. I got a job as a Christian, as a history teacher, a small Christian high school, and thought things were going to be great. and I hated it. It sucked. It was horrible. It was just like detention and gum monitoring the whole time. I was like, this is not for me. But what I did find was I actually really loved teaching the material, which I found high school is not actually about teaching material. Apparently, at least the one that I was at. And but I loved like these ideas and conveying the ideas, and then I actually really missed reading, and I missed sitting around in a room talking about texts and why they matter. Then I remembered that were the kind of small like advice. Oh, well, you should think about grad school. So I called my professor and I said, so how does this grad school thing work? Where should I go? And he said, Duke or Princeton. I was like, okay. So I applied to Duke and Princeton, and I got into Duke and went on. In the meantime, I stopped teaching at my Christian high school because I was getting paid like $5 an hour. It was not a good situation. And I just taught like at a normal business. Like I just got a desk job at some basic company, and I was inputting stuff, and in between there to kind of help make ends meet, I was working at department stores and Eddie Bauer and anything else that I could do to make ends meet. I think from the time I graduated till the time I got this job, I think I almost always had at least 4 jobs in some form or another. And then went to Duke, did my master's in theology, and hung around for a little bit as a TA, full-time TA, and then went into the doctoral program, finished my doctorate in 4 years, and then this was my job here. So that's kind of like a long thing. I can fill in some other stuff along the way, but that's my story right now.
Hi, I'm Debbie Pope, and when I first walked on campus at Bethany Bible College and I said, hi, I'm Debbie Pope, everybody said, Davy? And I said, no, I didn't say Davy, it's Debbie. So I wound up driving across country from Tennessee in 1978 to go to college in California after graduating from high school and going to work at a check printing factory where I was a typist and a proofreader, and I typed name, address, city, state, and account number, and then proofread that for 8 hours a day. So to make this, this is a long story. I've got to encapsulate things here, but what happened is at some point in 1976, I became a Christian, and I became one of the really crazy Christians in that I had a rabid conversion experience, okay? And so for 2 years, I was like high as a kite on Jesus, and that's not a bad thing. I'm not making fun of it. It's just who I was. It's what it took. And one day I crashed back to earth, and I call her my crazy Aunt Lucy, and I hope you've got one. She was my spiritual mentor, which explains a lot. But I asked her one day, and in all seriousness, is this all I'm ever going to do? And she said, well, you need to go to school, And I almost laughed because nobody in my family ever did that. I'm the first person in my family to go to college. And so with my crazy Aunt Lucy, I drove across country with a wing and a prayer. I'd been turned down for financial aid. I had $68 and a half tank of gas. She had enough money to fly home, and we got there. And I was able to stay. Thank you, Paul Veloquit, financial aid director, who got me my first student loan. And then our college president was Richard Foth. Now Dr. Richard Foth, and he was a communicator like none I had ever heard in my life. And you should go find him on YouTube or not YouTube, what's the other one that they listen to all the time? Where the music comes from. iTunes. Thank you, iTunes. He's on iTunes. Anyway, when I discovered that he'd gone to Wheaton College graduate school, I said that's where I'm going. And so I went to Wheaton graduate school, and there was impacted by the inimitable Dr. Robert Weber, and became a teacher for lots of reasons, but he's one of the main reasons. I wanted to be a candle lighter. I wanted to encourage people and get them excited about a topic, because I'll never forget the first day he walked into class. We were at the back. If you've ever been to Wheaton Chapel, Wheaton College, there's a big chapel in the back. There's a big room, a big tall ceiling. For some reason, there was a big, gigantic, tall ladder. This wild-headed, curly-haired person came running into the classroom, threw down his books, and as we watched, 28 men and 2 women, he walked over to the ladder, he climbed the ladder, he turned around, he sat down, and he looked at us, and these are my first words from a Wheaton College professor. He said, my hair looks terrible. And then he sat there and lectured on church fathers for the rest of the class period. So that was it for me. I mean, there are others. There were precursors to Bob Weber, but I decided I wanted to be a teacher, and what did I do before that? In college, I did a lot of things. I pumped gas one week. In grad school, I was a cocktail waitress for one night. And somebody flirted with me, and I said, "Oh, I'm going home." But I've done all kinds of things, and I wound up coming out to the Pacific Northwest in 1994 to teach. I taught in Japan for a while. I taught at the New York. I didn't teach there. I worked at the New York State Department of Health AIDS Institute in New York City, while I lived in an Episcopalian convent with a bunch of nuns. That was interesting. It was all I could afford. It was great, you know. Sister Mary Elizabeth's coffee would have taken the hide off a horse. So many fun memories. Anyway, I wound up coming out here in '94 to teach at Northwest University in Kirkland in both English and communication. So I was there for my first 2 years. I had saved enough money to come out here, and after 2 years I realized I need a second job. So I walked into SPU's communication department with Dr. He just passed away. I can't think of his name, but he looked like Bozo the Clown. And when I walked into his office, Bob Chamberlain, when I walked into his office, because he had a hair that stuck out like Bozo the Clown, and I thought, it's Bozo the Clown. So I introduced myself, I gave him my resume, and a week later he hired me to teach public speaking at SPU. So I've been teaching at SPU altogether. This is my 9th year full-time. I left Northwest in 2008, joined the faculty here full-time 2008, but I'd been teaching part-time 12 years before that. So however many years that is, 21, I'm not good at math. I've been teaching COM 1101 at 8 o'clock in the morning on Monday, Wednesday, Friday for all those years. So there's lots more to the story, but I guess that's good for now.
All right, well, as a child, 3rd grade, 2nd grade, 3rd grade, I wanted to be an architect, and that was my passion. I loved drawing homes and sketching out floor plans until someone, I don't know who it was, told me that if I wanted to be an architect, I had to be just like off the charts good in math. And I was okay in math, but that probably wasn't the right counsel to a child. You can't do it. You have to be great at math. So I dropped it, and so I kind of put it in the back burner and moved forward. And in high school, I felt the call to some type of ministry, at least to give my life to something greater than myself. We could have been co-pastors, because you could have preached. I could have gone to the potlucks, greeted at the door. That would have worked. But I didn't feel a call to be a senior pastor, or certainly not youth ministry. I'm like you. I like little kids. I like college kids. Anything in between, not so well. I loved myself, but I didn't like my kids at that age. So I didn't want other kids. So from there, though, in my undergrad experience, I began to understand that serving in Christian higher education was one way in which I could serve and make a difference and contribute to the kingdom. And the way I'm kind of wired and designed, I'm not gifted to be a faculty member. And so kind of looking at my own kind of gifts and abilities, really saw that administration was one area that perhaps I could contribute. And so I had a number of mentors, the dean of the School of Business, the vice president for student life, my college pastor, and then my provost. And really began to see that the administrative path that I saw myself on when I was 20 was that I thought, well, I could serve as a college president. So I got counsel from those 4 individuals, and it was the provost that said, well, if you want to be a college president of a Christian university, you should go to law school. So I took the advice, much like others here, and just said, all right, I'm going to go to law school. So out of undergrad, I went to University of Kansas Law and graduated from law school, added on a joint MBA at the same time. And then right out of undergrad, I'd always said, yes, God, I will serve you in Christian higher education. Had an opportunity right out of law school to serve, and said, well, no, I think I'm going to work about 10 years in corporate, and then maybe I'll serve in Christian higher education. So I kind of went off my path and began to work at Payless Shoe Source, an executive training program, and then was placed in corporate real estate on the legal side. But God continued to work with me, and so I said, all right, God, I'll do something. If you can do anything with it, great. If not, I'll be released in my own mind and can continue on my path. But as soon as I did that, God prepared the way and opened the doors, and I moved into Christian higher education in 1994 in that administrative track, really in the fundraising realm. And so my career has been really in fundraising and administration. I then went and pursued a doctorate in education at the University of Kansas, and then another doctorate in education at the University of Pennsylvania, but really just served in Christian education through a number of universities and through a number of different roles, then ending up as president. My goal was to be a president by the time I was 40. So I was elected at my last institution 3 weeks after my 40th birthday. So I missed it by 3 weeks, but at least it was in that 40th year. So served at Mount Vernon Nazarene for 6 years, and then completing 5 years here.
So my background, basically my dad was a lawyer, his dad was a lawyer, his dad was a lawyer. So the expectation was I would be a lawyer. But even really starting when I was about 10 or 11, the decision for me was lawyer or priest. And let me tell you, if you want an awesomely exciting high school experience, tell people that you plan to become a priest. Things change enormously. Is Brad Murg going to be there? Okay, you can go. You basically become a chaperone for life. Ultimately, I went to Emory University for undergraduate, and I did my bachelor's degree in philosophy because I was in discernment process with the Jesuits. And one of the things you have to do if you become a Jesuit priest is you have to go do a master's degree in philosophy. So I figured, okay, I'll do philosophy. And philosophy fascinated me, and I ended up graduating in 3 years with both my bachelor's and master's in philosophy. But moral philosophy led me to economics. Reading it basically led me through the work of Adam Smith, led me to economic thought, led me to becoming interested in poverty and development questions, which I had really never thought about working about. I thought that my calling for service was going to be the priesthood, and this kind of led me to, there's this whole other area. So when I finished off undergrad, I was awarded a Henry Luce Scholarship, and I was sent to work at the Asian Development Bank in Manila, and worked there, traveling all around Asia, working on legal reform programs, all this other stuff, which I loved and thought it was fascinating. But so I then went off and decided, okay, priesthood thing. My spiritual director was saying, okay, you got time. You're only 22, 23 to figure it out. So I went and did my master's degree at the London School of Economics, and took it, and then came back to work in Asia for about 3 years, working in Cambodia with Mary Knoll, a Catholic NGO, and then doing some consulting for World Bank and ADB. And I felt very drawn to the region, to staying and working in the region, so I spent a year and a half living in China, learning Chinese and doing some consulting on the side. And I still was working on one project I started years earlier at ADB, and it went horribly wrong. It was a $350 million loan project that absolutely failed. And we were trying to look at what is the causation behind this, and that is what led me to go do my PhD. I was wondering, okay, clearly the theories we're working with, what we're doing isn't working. I want to figure out why we just wasted $350 million trying to reform the court system in Pakistan, and it didn't work. I had no intention to basically go into a career in teaching or in academia. I was told when I applied by my undergrad professors, just tell them you're going to become a research academic and they'll let you in. Don't say you want to go back into government, or don't tell them you're thinking about becoming a priest. Don't mention that. So that was basically how I moved forward, and finished off my PhD. And I actually was an adjunct professor here for about 1.5 years, 2 years before I started as a tenure track professor. I finally kind of figured out my vocation late in life, really only when I was 35, 36, where I felt, oh, wow, teaching, I really like this. And basically decided that was the route I would go, and serving at a Christian university was where I was meant to be. And that's how I ended up here. Ironically, looking back, when I was chatting with, I have a twin sister, and we were chatting about this, and she said, so you research law and development and you teach? And I was like, yeah. And she said, you know, Dad's a lawyer and Mom's a high school is a high school English teacher. You just combined our parents' professions into one. So sometimes maybe you just can't escape the genetics or the heritage.
So I have a question for the panel, but before I ask, I want to ask some of the students that I tapped in here earlier and said, you better have a question. I hope you have it, because your time is coming soon. So this question is for anyone on the panel. Some people believe that you choose your vocation. Some people believe that your vocation chooses you. Others believe you kind of fall into it. And I hear a lot of that on the panel. So will a couple of you share in 2 to 3 sentences, what is some advice that you have for our students in this room when they think about considering what their calling is or what their vocation is, what do you wish you would have spent more time thinking about or less time thinking about? So any of you can answer. You don't all have to, but. Or you can answer.
If there's great uncertainty, well, I guess in a nutshell, it's try a lot of things. Try lots of things. I once heard somebody use the analogy of an old time pre-digital radio dial. Just keep turning the dial, and then there's some music will come on that catches your ear. You might go past, then you'll come back to it. So just try a lot of stuff, and that's one of many things. Be a good listener and feel what's going on in here. And also don't be afraid of getting excited about something, taking some steps and finding out, oops, that wasn't it. That's valuable education. That is not failure. Anyway, there's much more to say, but let's hear from others.
Yeah, I would say there's a couple things. One is, I mean, I'm not sure that there's a perfect job, but I will say that through all these various experiences that I had, I was very attentive to the things that resonated and the things that didn't. So when I was teaching high school, okay, I like the material, I like thinking about the material, but I'm not sure that these students are the ones that I resonate most deeply with, or this particular way of learning or this setup, right? And so you kind of resonate a little bit, and then you kind of hit something where it doesn't quite feel, and then you kind of look for that place where like the sound is getting a little louder. At the same time, though, I think that we're kind of under this illusion, and I know even for me, where our lives can be so adapted to our individual tastes that when something feels like not perfect, that there must be something else that's perfect out there, and there's really not. There's nothing perfect. But I will say the way that you think about that, though, is what are the imperfections that you're willing to live with because you get to do this? And I feel like for me that helps me a little bit. Like I don't like to grade. I hate grading, really. But I grade. I'm willing to deal with it because I get to hang out with you. I get to talk with you about things, and I get to see you all grow. I get to have time where I get to write a little bit. I'm a person I like flexibility. I don't like being told like I have to be here at this time all the time. If I wake up on a Tuesday and I don't want to hang out in my pajamas and read for a little bit, I can do that. Unless I want to go to chapel, which I gotta hustle a little bit. So like that pattern and that flexibility, I think fits the way that I'm wired. So I think it's like it's a little bit of both in a lot of ways, but trying a lot of different things, listening to the limitations, and figuring out which limitations you're willing to live with. I think it's a really big thing.
I didn't set out to become a teacher. I think I became a teacher because of the examples that I witnessed in undergrad and grad school. The people who so loved what they were doing that when they walked into a room, it's like life walked into the room with them. And I mean, that's when I knew, I said, that's what I want to do. And the other thing is, I was just sitting here listening to both of the gentlemen to my right speaking, and I thought, the thing is, I love what I do. So I would say, do a lot of things, but when you find something you absolutely love, then that should tell you something. Sit up and pay attention. I don't feel like I have a job. I have a life. I have a life. And that's just really amazing. And I get to come here and hang out with y'all. And I never hang out in my pajamas because I get up at 3:30 in the morning.
I would just say, I think all of us spoke about a mentor or someone speaking into their life, so I would lean into those that are journeying with you, that have a few years on you, that can think about who you are and maybe suggest things. Then I think I would also like to say, to Brian's point, if you have an ultimate career objective, you may do a number of jobs that don't necessarily resonate with you, but you have to have in order to achieve your objective. So don't check out too soon from opportunities or assignments or jobs that can provide exactly what you're going to need later on in life.
Basically reiterating what the panel said, but I mean, the question is, do you like it? I mean, is this actually something you enjoy? And also, let's be frank, is this something you're good at? Is this something that you have a skill at? This is God's gift. This is God's gift to you. That's the easiest part. The only other thing I would add is, the question is, what do you want to do? Not what do you think you should do. Not what do your friends think you should do. Not what do your mom and dad and your cousins and everybody else think you should do. But the question of what do you want to do? Because ultimately, it's your life. I mean, ultimately, you're the one that pays the cost if it's not what you want. And that takes some time. And don't be afraid to go off the path for a bit. Don't be afraid to, okay, I'm going to try out this, as everyone's been saying. You don't have to we all know that one person who at age 4 said they wanted to be a doctor. And then they're a doctor. That's all they wanted to do. They had that straight, correct, perfect. So jealous. But that's not most people. So most of us, it takes some trial and error.
Yes.
Do any of you still have student debt? And was your family concerned about you taking on student debt?
I think that should go to the youngest. I mean, that wasn't even like a term when I went to college. But I see that it is such a powerful factor these days. I would say that has got to be a really top priority, to just attack that thing and nail it, because you hear these stories now of people is dragging on to obviously into their 30s, but into their 40s and into their 50s, and like that, you talk about a major distraction. So even if you're not sure what your career objective is, just get on that right away. And for me, it was not a factor, but I don't know about younger folk.
My wife and I, between the two of us, we owe a small house in North Carolina, basically. Our undergrad wasn't too bad, but we were married. We got married when we were 21. We had our first kid when we were 23, but we still felt like going to school was important. We managed to not take out as much it's kind of slowly accumulated. But when it was time for me to do my doctorate, it was basically like, well, we're going to owe this money for the rest of our life. But I'm going to get to do something that I love to do, was the first part of it. The second part of it was, and this is the more practical consideration, I'm doing something where my kids will go to school wherever I teach. And so that was that. So we're paying their college fund and my school all at the same time. And that's kind of the way that we approached it. If we had a different, if I was going to be doing something different, if I was going to be a pastor or something, like maybe not. But that was kind of the practical consideration that we made. But I had worked in a private company job and actually considered thinking about like, oh, maybe I'll just work up the ladder, and I probably would have been paid, earning a lot more than I'm earning now. But I just couldn't see it. I just couldn't see it for myself. So I just like dying inside. So thank the Lord for income-based repayment plans. And yeah, so that's the thing, is like I don't know what's going to happen with Trump, but income-based repayment plans are a gift from God. So, and so it makes it manageable right now.
Yes, I had full scholarship for undergrad, and then for my master's, for my PhD, full scholarship. But when you do a PhD, you make maybe $17,000 a year, which is, and I lived in Seattle, so even when I did it, it was still hard. So you take a little bit of debt. A good rule of thumb is, keep it low. Basically, don't do private debt. Don't go to private. Don't go to Citibank. Don't go to Wells Fargo. If you're going to take out debt, go through the feds. Go through the FAFSA. Go through that loan program. But private debt can get really different. Debt's manageable, and it's a stressful situation as you get a little bit older. One of the greatest lessons of vocation is if you really screw up your credit, your life becomes a lot harder. So if you're going to take out loans, great, but do the income-based repayment plan and do the payments. a lot of doors can shut. A lot of firms, do credit checks on future employees. So keeping your credit clean, paying off your debt, et cetera, is one of those great vital life lessons. And I'd say that as an econ guy too. So.
I have a question. Could you, all of you and any of you that have experience with mentors, elaborate a bit more? Because I have like about 3 mentors and I had them all through community college. And I think it's really important, but I don't really get a chance to hear other peers talk about it in their undergrad or community college. They seem to think that mentors only magically appear in grad school, but do you elaborate about how important it is, like individually?
I did not have any mentors. I was thinking about this. I don't know why I was thinking about this, but in my undergrad school, when I got to Bethany, I think there was one female professor on campus, and she was in the music department. No one mentored me in undergrad school, and no one really mentored me in grad school. And one of the reasons that when I started to teach at the college level, and I look back on that experience, I mean, I had, again, great college professors, some that I just absolutely adored. But I thought, one of the reasons I want to teach is that I want to be a mentor to young women, simply because I didn't have it myself.
I would just say, for me, I had a career goal, and so the individuals that I had confidence in, and I trusted, and they had some experience or knowledge of where I wanted to head. And so by letting them know what I felt God was calling me to do, gave them that door and opportunity for them to invest in my life from their perspective and their experience. And so, the Career Center and Mark Oppenlander and others, if you think you have an idea for a career path, they will identify individuals in that role or that assignment that you can talk to and become, have a conversation with about what it's like for them. People that are in certain assignments where they see young people have a desire to move into, at least to explore the possibility, they would love to pour into your life, to invest in your life, to talk about their experience in some way, provide opportunities, open doors for you. So for me, it was a very specific role that I was moving toward, and these individuals had expertise in terms of the path that I would need to travel in order to get there. So was that hook in terms of my relationship with my mentors.
Another question?
I have one. Do either of you recall a regret or missed opportunity that impacted your vocation or your direction in some way? Do you regret anything? Did you miss out on something you wish?
I guess for me, it's really, really hard to say that, actually. So I didn't have a really smooth path to anything. I mean, nothing was given to me. So I didn't have full rides. I had to prove who I was, what my questions were the whole way, work jobs, all the way up. But I can't say that, I can't see how every single one of those things was necessary for me to have the questions that I had. So I mean, even when I applied for the doctoral program the first time, straight out of my master's program, I didn't get in. It was between me and my friend, my best friend actually, and he got in and I didn't. And they asked me to stay on this kind of full-time TA, and I was like, oh, okay, I guess I'll hang around. But through that process, I actually learned the entire Duke Divinity School MDiv curriculum, because I TA'd for every single class through the whole core curriculum, got to know every single professor, saw every teaching style, good and bad. And when I applied the next time, I knew exactly what I wanted to write, how I wanted to write, but I also knew what kind of teacher I wanted to be, how my work fit into the greater curriculum. So when I got here, I knew more deeply what a curriculum was, how it got connected. And then in a lot of ways, I mean, every little kind of twist and turn thing that didn't quite go the way I expected really did add to, it gave me a kind of wisdom or discernment or experience that added to the person that I am, and clarified for me what it was that I wanted to do and what I didn't want to do, and how I wanted to go about it and how I didn't want to go about it. So I guess I don't think I had too much.
I just kind of want to get your guys' opinions on taking a gap year afterwards or going straight to a graduate program, and the difference between going straight to a terminal master's and a PhD program after that. That's kind of where I'm at, and I feel like some other people might be in that same situation right now. So.
I highly recommend taking a gap of at least a year. I mean, I guess it depends on the I mean, I know that some professions it's better to go quickly, but at least for me, like in humanities, don't go back until you really want to go back. It takes a lot of energy, a lot of emotional energy, a lot of time, a lot of money, and you need to have like a kind of internal motivation for why you're there to get you through. I think that's really, really important. And versus master's versus terminal and PhD, I think it just depends on the vocation. So in theology, you have to get a master's of theological studies or something along those lines, or an MDiv before you get the PhD. There aren't any joint programs. So it really, that to me depends on the field and what it is that you're looking for. But those gap years are really important, I think, for clarifying who you are as a person. Because when you get into a master's or grad program, I mean, imagine like that one class that had all those annoying people that thought they knew exactly what the right answer was all the time and exactly what they were going to be. Like that's grad school on like 10. So unless you come in kind of having some sense about why you're there, it's not that you won't do well, but it's harder to find your center when it's tilting so much in different ways. And I think especially as a person of color, women that I know who are in these kinds of programs, having that center is really important. Knowing what it is that you want to get out of the program rather than having all these other people tell you what you should get out of the program. And I think that's to have a little bit of time to know kind of what the time that way gives you some buckets that you go in with and you know how you want to fill them. Whereas when you go in straight, someone's giving you the bucket and you don't even know if it's the right bucket or if it's the right size. And then you got to, by the time you figure it out, you got to go like exchange it, put that, reorganize it, which you learn from, but it's not, I think it's better to have come in with a good amount of experience about yourself and about the world and whatever it is that you want to do.
I think if you do the if you're doing a master's and probably not going to a PhD, wait. Do a few years of work experience in your 20s, see how it moves forward, and then you do the master's, and then you basically build on that. Oh, I've got my 4 or 5 years of experience, my master's, boom, you're into a middle level position. PhD, I also generally encourage people to give it some time, also because there's a lot of other stuff that you can do in your 20s that you can't ever do again. Travel is a big one. Where you can obviously travel later on, but you don't get I'm going to move to country X for a couple of years. So that is a big bonus to have that time. That being said, some people are the kind of folks that they want to just get it done and they flourish and they're ready to go, and it's doable. But it is the PhD is a long slog, especially the research PhD. And so if you're going social sciences, you'll do your master's first within the PhD program, and then you do your exams, and then you do your research and your dissertation. But it's a slog, and it's good to, I think, have a year or two out before doing it, just to avoid burnout. Remembering it's important to remember that in doctoral programs, particularly in the social sciences, other fields as well. I know in my field the attrition rate, the number of students that start and don't finish, is over 50%. So you want to know going in, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon.
And you may get to that 2 years of master's, fine, but when it's time to switch it into the PhD, like there's just no energy. But that's when it needs to be continual if you're going to do the PhD, that's when it kind of needs to keep having it be a little smoother. Yeah, I know a lot of people hit that wall. It's hard.
Depending, of course, on the area of study you're considering, or the the field you're considering, the gap year or time away from school can be really beneficial. And just thinking in my own case, my first experiences involved learning, the discipline and daily rhythm of getting up and going to work, working in groups. It involved traveling. I was amazed in my work as a young naval officer how much I was calling on my 9th grade teacher's geography class. So there's this opportunity when you're out just working, doing your work, you're calling on all different parts of your education. And by, the hunger and thirst will come in its own time. And then that's probably the moment you begin to think about graduate school or whatever is next. But there is something, I think it's important I know it's important for me, and it's important for some of us to have a part of our life where you don't have homework. So you can go home and you're done for the day, and your mind can do other things. And so if graduate school is in your future, it will come. It will come. You'll know.
I have a question. For some of our students in this room,
We have just 1 minute.
okay. For some of our students in this room, they may not have access to things like traveling after they're done with school, for many different life circumstances and reasons. And I'm hearing a lot about getting life experience, especially in your 20s when you're, for some people, they're untethered. They can do whatever they want with certain limitations. What, in one sentence, are your 20s for?
I won't answer that right now, but I do want to say, in Seattle Times had an article about 3 weeks ago in the Sunday paper for young graduates how to travel the world for free. Had all kinds of resources out there. So if you check Seattle Times last 2 or 3 weeks to a month, Sunday paper, you'll find that article in the travel section.
That'll be great. In my view, your 20s are when you basically try to figure out, you at least try to get on the path of where you want to be. When I advise students, I say a good rule of thumb is you don't have to be where you want to be where you're 25, but when you're 30, you need to be on that road, because after that, some doors close.
And I was that oddity. I was pretty driven, pretty motivated, so I was on my path and moving forward for me.
Not settling down.
I was married with kids, so. But you know what though? We kind of went. All our friends were having all this fun, and we're like, oh, this would be like, why aren't we doing this? But now I'm 40, and I actually know who I am, and I have money to do the things that I want to do, rather than the things that I think I should do. So I don't know. I think the 20s are for beginning to discover who you are.
And 40 is the age to write a book, Death of Racism, which he's just put out.
Death of Race.
Death of Race. No?
Thank you. I would say
Okay.
Oh, would you? Yes, I would say when you graduate, get out there and keep exploring, have a good time, get a job, and don't worry that the perfect job is not gonna arrive at your doorstep on June 13th or whatever the day after graduation is, for most of us. And so find good work to do and do it wholeheartedly, and use the time to think. And don't get a job that has homework. That will help you.
And can we all put our hands together and thank this fabulous group? Thanks so much for your wisdom, for all your lives after college. And to the rest of you, we'll see you throughout the week.